Hello friends, I am Pradeep. Today I'll be discussing about Agile Manifesto and values. Agile values are derived or defined in Agile Manifesto, and this Agile Manifesto was developed way back in 2001 by 17 software development enthusiasts. Agile values speak about better way of software development. So we'll quickly check all these values. Individuals and interaction over processes and tools. If we take a look at any failed project, then we can easily come up with one major reason for failure is communication gap. And this communication gap is introduced into the development process because of processes and tools. Over the period of development time, we got ourselves dependent heavily on these processes and tools. How? I'll tell you. In a development process, a developer built some piece of code. Now, he will push that piece of code for a code review using some tool. In our case, we use Code Collaborator. Once the code review is triggered in Code Collaborator, code reviewer get a request for the code review. In that situation, code reviewer look at the piece of code, newly added code, and make some assumptions about the flow, the use case, and all relevant situations with respect to the code. And he go ahead with the approval of the code. In some cases, if there are any concerns, he discuss with the developer. Now, in this whole situation, if we take a look, 80% job is performed without any communication. But if you look at the same situation in different aspect, once the developer triggered the code review for the code reviewer and the code author comes together, discuss the requirement, share the idea about the logical flow and dependencies on different modules and different use cases where how this code will going to work, the behavior of the code. In that situation, code reviewer will get a sufficient idea about the newly added code, and in case if he have any corner cases in his mind, he will immediately suggest to the developer, and these corner cases would be added into the piece of code. That leads to the better development or the better feature development, right? In the second scenario, due to the good interaction between the developer and code reviewer, we got the better value into the features. So that's individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Then working software over comprehensive documentation. If we take a look at the old way or the waterfall way of software development approach, with the beginning of the project, we start with a project charter and we end the project with the lessons learned. But between these two processes, we create huge number of documents. Right from the beginning of requirements, then planning. Planning consists of so many number of documents such as scope, schedule, cost, risk, quality, and whatnot. And then design documents, any limitations, and we keep producing huge number of documentation. In fact, I would say we tend to get good at creating good documentation. And once the software is delivered to the customer has to heavily depend on all this documentation to get the software working, right? But in case if we build a software which is very reliable, robust and user friendly, then I would say there would be very less dependency on the documentation. And frankly speaking, nobody would like to go for a documentation reading hundreds and hundred pages before start working on software. Recently, I have seen one very good product. I would like to share that experience. I bought a D-Link router. I am quite impressed with that because it took only 3 steps to install and configure the product. Just unpack it, install it, and configure the settings over URL, and your router is up and running. That kind of value we would like to see into the product, and not the piles and piles of the pages shared across the development team and at the end to the customer. Then the next value is customer collaboration or contract negotiation. This scenario or this use case has been a very much trivial. We have seen this problem with waterfall in a large scale, I would say. What happens in waterfall? Customer is involved at the beginning of the project, like gathering all the requirements, discussing, and till the freezing the scope of all these requirements. And then onwards, customer is no more in the development picture, and we slowly move throughout the development process, and by the end, once we develop the project and share with the customer, there is a huge variance between customers' expectations and what we have delivered, because there is no communication between customer and the development team. This variance lead to the unhappy environment or unsatisfied review or view towards the product. If customer is involved throughout the development process at all the levels, and if we collect the timely feedback from the customer, this happens in case of Agile. Customer is involved in a sprint planning meeting. Stakeholders, product owner, business analyst, and lots of other people are involved in sprint planning meeting, where we define acceptance criteria. And by the end of the sprint, customer is again involved in sprint review meeting, where development team shares the working software or they demo to the customer. And at that point, customer can share the feedback. If they want any change, it can be accepted and accommodated into the product, or else customer happily accept the newly developed features. That's where we can minimize the variance between acceptance criteria and the developed features. And the last, responding to the change over following plan. This is another problem with the waterfall, or the shortcoming of the waterfall. In a phase-wise execution, once we're done with the requirement gathering, designing, and freezing the scope of the product requirements, Development team goes ahead with the developing all the requirements sequentially, one by one. And this is like a 6 to 9 months gap on an average. Meanwhile, customer feels that they want to change some requirements or they want to update some requirements with respect to specific customization, or they want to update requirements with respect to their typical business need. Now, these requirement updates are really difficult to implement with respect to the current design. Sometimes it can create a threat to the existing design, and if this change in requirement comes at the last stages of the product development, then it's pretty difficult for the development team to accommodate all these changes, and there is a resistance, there is an unhappy environment. So, to avoid such a situations, in Agile, product development is done in smaller chunks, and all the requirements updates are given timely basis to the product owner and to the development team, and it's product owner's responsibility to accept the change, accommodate the changes into the requirement, and update the product backlog according to that. So in upcoming sprints or iteration, the changes will be accepted and developed by the development team, and there would be more value into the product and customer would be satisfied. Now, there are things specified on the right and there are things specified on the left. Here, Agile values make more sense where the things specified on the right, but it does not mean that we should stop doing all these things like more rely on processes and tools, then comprehensive documentation or contract negotiation and follow-up plan. All these things are necessary, but what Agile value says, value the things which are specified on the left compared to the things specified on the right, and they have proven the returns over the period of time. So that's it about Agile values. Thank you very much. Have a good day.